Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another live stream here with Empty Cloud Monastery. So we'll begin with a period of guided meditation, and then after that I'll give a Dhamma talk and take any questions that you might have at the end. So please start by getting in meditation posture. So taking the time to carefully arrange your body. So sitting with your pelvis tilted slightly forward, with the weight evenly distributed across your sitting bones. Your back straight, the head balanced evenly on top of the spine, shoulders back and relaxed so that the chest is open and spacious. Chin tilted very slightly down so that the throat is completely open. And if you're feeling awake and alert, then you can close your eyes. Otherwise, keep your eyes half open and pointed down at about a 45-degree angle. Hands resting gently in your lap with the thumb tip slightly touching. And take a few long, slow, deep breaths. Just letting the air flow smoothly in and out through your nose. Relaxing your body and mind with each breath. Paying particular attention to relaxing your face, especially the muscles around your eyes and your jaw. And bring a slight smile to your face. Start by listening. So opening your awareness to sound. Just letting the sounds of each moment flow through your mind without conceptualizing, not forming a concept or idea about any of the sounds, not reacting, just letting the sounds flow through the mind without sticking, without reaction. And keeping that broad, open awareness of sound, bring attention into your body. Clearly feeling the warmth of the body, feeling its weight, its mass. a solid, heavy, warm mass. So bringing the mind into the body, clearly feeling the whole body. And centering attention at your hands, where they rest in your lap. So this is the seat of the mind, the centerpiece of the mind. And if you like, you can center the mind in an even more refined location, the point where your thumb tips touch. So letting the mind be completely stable and unmoving, centered at your hands, clearly aware of the whole body, clearly aware of the whole sensory domain. Aware of every sensation, every thought, every emotion, but not reacting to any of them, not chasing any of them, not withdrawing from any of them. The mind never moving from its still point at the hands. So you can practice in this way for the next period of time, keeping body and mind very still, alert, and peaceful. Enjoying this peaceful alertness. You can release your posture, stretch a little bit. So at this time I'll give a short Dhamma talk. So we can start by paying homage to the Buddhas. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So here at the monastery, we're starting a period of meditation retreat. So for the next week, we'll be focusing on meditation practice, much more so than usual. And also coming up next month, we'll have our annual monastic winter retreat. So doing a lot of meditation over the course of 3 months. So for this evening, I was thinking of talking a bit about meditation retreat, so retreat practice. So what helps in getting the most out of a period of intensive meditation. And this is relevant, of course, most relevant when one is in meditation retreat, when one is participating in an intensive meditation retreat. But it's also relevant if you want to get the most out of your own personal practice. So whether you're staying in a monastery or living by yourself or living with a partner or a family, there's ways of getting the most out of your daily practice. So it's important to have a quality of commitment and determination in one's ongoing daily routine. So some of the approaches to benefiting from a meditation retreat can also be relevant in one's daily practice. So first off, recognizing that the central component of a meditation retreat is 2 things. So the retreat schedule and the retreat guidelines. So in a retreat format, these are what create the container for one's practice. It's what creates the support structure for the retreat practice. So, of course, there's many different styles of retreat. Some have extremely tight, dense, strict schedule with very little free time, not much time even for sleeping, let alone doing any activity other than meditation. Other retreats have a very open schedule. Some retreats actually have almost no schedule at all. But whatever schedule there is, one makes a commitment to following it completely and unquestioningly. So taking the schedule as a necessity, a requirement. So taking it as something which is just as critical and important as anything else that we might do with our time. So taking the retreat schedule as the basic shape of our day, and not straying from it. And similarly, the retreat guidelines. So the rules that we follow, which here at the monastery, and pretty much every day we're following rules which are quite similar to retreat guidelines. The main addition is that during retreats, we make an extra effort to avoid any unnecessary talking. So we make an extra effort to maintain silence at all times, except when really necessary. But otherwise, our daily guidelines are quite similar to what one would find during a retreat. So things like not eating outside of scheduled times, things like refraining from unnecessary electronics usage. Trying to keep one's mind focused on one's spiritual practice. Similarly, avoiding entertainment or even reading things which are not related to Buddhism. So not trying to avoid anything which distracts the mind and pulls the mind away from focusing on Buddhism. And in particular, trying to avoid anything which is going to disrupt our concentration or weaken our mindfulness or anything which might strengthen our defilements, anything which might strengthen the hindrances of mind, anything which might build up our sensual desire or our aversion, anything which might increase our restlessness, avoiding anything which might make us sleepy or hazy, and also avoiding things which are outside the domain of Orthodox Buddha Dhamma, because such things tend to generate wrong views in the mind, things which pull the mind down unhelpful ways of thinking. So outside of retreat, one might do some of those things, though hopefully not too much. But during retreat time, one makes an extra effort to avoid any kind of activity which might disrupt or weaken one's meditation practice. So again, completely refraining from entertainment of any kind, completely avoiding non-Buddhist literature, and also paying attention to what we're doing with our mind and our body throughout the day that might be producing restlessness. So an example of this is during one retreat, there was a man on the retreat who was having a really hard time sitting still during meditation. He seemed very agitated and restless during the breaks. He seemed to be having a really difficult time, even just holding still for a few seconds. And then I was talking with him later on, and he revealed that he'd been drinking a lot more coffee than usual. So for some reason, he had decided that during the retreat, he was going to drink even more coffee than usual. I'm not quite sure why he got this idea. Maybe he wanted to be extra alert. And I guess it just didn't occur to him that drinking huge amounts of coffee can also make you very agitated and restless, which is really not good for your meditation. So there's nothing evil about drinking coffee. It's not bad karma to drink coffee. But if you have too much, then that's going to be bad for your meditation practice. So during a retreat, we try to avoid something like that. Similarly, I've seen people who during meditation retreat, they're constantly nodding off, falling asleep during meditation. And talking to them later, it's because, again, they made this decision that during retreat, they were only going to sleep for 4 hours a night. It's like, only 4 hours, that's all I need. I read it in a book somewhere. And it's like, well, okay, that's fine. You read it in a book somewhere, and there's actually about, 1/10 of 1% of people that works for. Apparently, you're not one of them. So let's be practical about this. Maybe you need to sleep a little bit more. So if you don't sleep enough at night, then what happens? Then you're sleepy during the day, which means it's really hard to meditate well. So there is such a thing as oversleeping, sleeping too much, and that's not helpful either. But in reducing one's sleep, one wants to be careful that one doesn't reduce one's sleep too much and wind up not sleeping enough. That's also not helpful. So it's about sleeping the right amount. So we want to be very practical. So during retreat time, you want to be very practical about all your choices, really watching how each decision you make affects the quality of your mind. Closely watching how each decision either strengthens your mindfulness and concentration or weakens your mindfulness and concentration. And one of the blessings of retreat practice is that because we're spending many, many hours in meditation every day, you can pretty clearly see the effects of what you're doing. So this also means things like, for example, during your break time, maybe you go and have a rest, and during the rest you spend it spacing out and daydreaming and fantasizing about this and that, or speculating about the characters in your favorite show, or dredging up memories of books you've read in the past, or whatever it is you might do with your time. And then during the next meditation period, those stories are rolling around in your mind. So again, it makes it very difficult to meditate. So then you can reflect, okay, so that time spent daydreaming was not only unhelpful, it was actually counterproductive. So I should try to avoid doing any kind of daydreaming during my break time. All the more so during your meditation time, of course. And also watching how your physical movements affect the state of your mind. So during retreat time, it's often encouraged to make an effort to walk quietly, to open and close doors quietly, to pick up and set down objects quietly, to do every action with a gentleness and an attentiveness. So this doesn't necessarily mean slow. Many years ago, there was a monk named Kamiko. And I'll never forget this quote, but he said very simply, he said, mindful does not mean slow. Mindful does not mean slow. You can do something quickly and still be completely mindful. You can also do something quickly and do it gently and quietly. And of course, it's also possible to do something slowly, but to do it in an unmindful, distracted, ungentle, noisy way. I've certainly seen countless examples of that. So the important thing is not the speed that one acts, but rather doing every action with complete attentiveness, mindfulness, gentleness, and also trying to reduce the amount of noise that we make in everything that we do. And this also helps to, first off, to maintain a continuity of practice between meditation periods. But also it helps to cultivate a gentleness of mind and a quietness of mind. So when we practice gentleness and quietness of body, that helps to support gentleness and quietness of mind, which is very supportive to good meditation. So this is another element of how we behave, how we act, that influences our meditation practice. So, and that also raises another important point, which is continuity of practice. So often what happens is when a meditation period comes to an end, the bell rings or the timer goes off and we're like, okay, the meditation is over. Now I can go back to being spacey and distracted. And that's what we do. We basically get up and we immediately forget about meditation and we go back to our old habits of being spacey and distracted and chasing our defilements and delusions and getting wrapped up in all our ordinary ways of thinking and reacting to things. And then later on, it's time to meditate again and we go and sit down for another period of meditation. And it's like starting over from the beginning. So we lost our momentum. We need to start over. So instead, during retreat practice, we put a strong emphasis on trying to have continuity of practice. In other words, when the meditation period ends, even though it's time to get up and move around and do other things, keep the sense of meditation with you. So as you're standing up, stand up with mindfulness and concentration. As you walk out of the meditation hall, walk out with mindfulness and concentration. As you sweep the floors or do the laundry or go back to your room for a rest or whatever it is, do it with mindfulness and concentration. So trying to carry with you the progress that you make during each meditation period, so that then when you come to the next period of meditation, you're not starting over from zero, but you've already have a little bit of progress built up. And to some degree, this tends to happen automatically during retreat time, just because we're doing so much meditation and we're cutting off most of the avenues of distraction. But if you make an extra effort to preserve your mindfulness and concentration through the break times and through the periods of activity, so working and eating and so on, if you make an extra effort to preserve your mindfulness and concentration during those times, then you'll notice a tangible difference. You'll notice that each meditation period just keeps getting stronger and stronger, keeps getting better and better. And in this way, it's possible to get very strong concentration in a relatively short amount of time. Usually within the first 2 or 3 days, you can notice a very strong shift in the mind. Not always, but usually within 3 days or so. If you make a really sincere effort, then within 3 days or so, the character of the mind can change very dramatically. So another important element in meditation practice, as I mentioned earlier, is the quality of non-reactivity, non-reaction. So whenever we experience a sensation, whether it's painful or pleasant, we try to be aware of it, but without reacting to it. If we need to respond, then we respond deliberately and intentionally. But we try not to react automatically or instinctively to any sensation. And this quality of non-reactivity also helps to build up a stability of mind and a presence of mind. It starts to build up serenity of mind, a sense of mental peacefulness, which also is incredibly supportive to concentration, to samadhi practice. So I've been talking about these things in the context of retreat, but these are also things that you can apply in your daily life. So of course it's more difficult. Retreat practice is intentionally designed to be easy. Doesn't always feel that way. When your knees hurt and your back hurts and it feels so difficult to concentrate and you're like, what was I thinking? Usually this comes up around day 2. There's one monk who, he calls it the day 2 blues. So day 2 is when you're like, oh, everything hurts. I'm so bored. I hate this. My concentration is so bad. Why did I come in this retreat? What was I thinking? That's pretty common. But if you stick with it, then something starts to shift. So settling into the meditation. And this brings up another very important element of retreat practice, by the way, which is giving up. And by giving up, I mean giving up any hope that the retreat will ever end. Giving up any hope that you will find anything to do other than meditate. Giving up any hope that you will find some way to entertain yourself. So you just resign yourself to the meditation. It's like, okay, I'm just going to sit right here and just be with this moment, whatever it is, because there's nothing else I can do. This is what I mean by giving up. So giving up any hope of doing something other than meditating. And meditation retreats, once again, are designed to support this attitude. They're designed to cut off our avenues of escape. And of course, if you really want to escape, you can just walk out the door and run away. But I don't recommend that. That's not going to do anybody any good. But we're trying to create a condition where it's really encouraging us to focus on our meditation practice, because our meditation practice is in fact our only escape. Through meditation practice, then we can learn how to be peaceful and happy, even when our knees hurt, even when we've been meditating for hours and hours and hours, and this desire arises in the mind. You can just see it arise, not be affected by it, and see it disappear. And then you start to realize that the escape from suffering is not through entertainment or distraction, but rather it's through presence of mind and non-reactivity. So meditation practice, once again, it often feels pretty challenging for the first couple of days. But after that, it tends to become quite easy, especially if one commits thoroughly to the retreat practices, the schedule and the guidelines of the retreat. Then, after 2, 3, 4 days, then one settles into it. One stops resisting, stops fighting the retreat, and settles into it, relaxes into it. And then it becomes easy. It becomes almost effortless. So again, as I said, retreat practice is designed to be as easy as possible. But you can also apply many of these practices outside of retreat. So even when you're not in retreat, try to live a quiet, peaceful, simple life. Try to minimize distraction. Try to minimize entertainment. Try to minimize things which produce restlessness or dullness. Make sure you're sleeping enough. Make sure you're not doing activities which stir up or agitate the mind. I remember when I was a teenager, I used to be into video games. And then when I started practicing meditation, at some point it occurred to me that if I was spending a lot of my time practicing, playing action games, then when I would go to meditate, my mind would be very, very wobbly and unstable. So all of that adrenaline produced through action games was making my mind unsteady, which was then making it very difficult to meditate. So look at what you're doing with your time. Start to see what is it that makes the mind unsteady, and try to reduce those activities. Instead, cultivate activities which bring stillness and quiet and peace to the mind. And also building up a sense of a continuity of practice. Again, whatever you're doing, even if you're not in retreat, maybe not meditating as much as you do during retreat, you should still be meditating every day, even if not as much as during retreat time. But trying to keep that sense of mindfulness and concentration through everything that you do. Preserving a sense of equanimity and stability of mind through everything that you do. A non-reactive mind, no matter what sensations arise, no matter what thoughts or emotions drift through one's awareness. And of course, devote lots of time to meditation practice. So the truth is that we actually have plenty of time to meditate. No matter how busy your life is, you have plenty of time to meditate. You just choose to do something else with your time. So start asking yourself, what am I choosing to do with my time? And perhaps I can choose to do more meditation with some of that time. Maybe I don't need to choose to do so many other things with my time. So busyness is often a choice that we're making. And we can choose to spend our time in other ways, in more wholesome ways, more peaceful ways. We can choose to spend our time practicing meditation and studying the suttas. It's just we choose to do other things instead. but we could choose to meditate and study if that's what we decide to do. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the central pillars of retreat practice is the schedule. So even if you're not in retreat, it can be very helpful to make a schedule for yourself. And it can be a very simple schedule, something simple like wake up at 5 o'clock, drink some tea, at 5:30, chant the 3 refuges and 5 precepts, and the recollection of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, then meditate for half an hour. Very simple schedule, so just a few minor components, but very important components that help to create a structure for your day. And then after doing that for a while, you might add in also some chanting and meditation in the evening before you go to bed, or even early in the evening while the mind is still fresh and sharp before the mind starts to get sleepy. So creating a schedule for yourself and making a real determination to follow it. This also is something which is very supportive. So these are just a few thoughts on retreat practice. Again, for those here at the monastery, we'll be spending the next week or so doing intensive meditation together. So these are a few words of encouragement. And I'll say some more tomorrow. For those who are watching remotely, these are also some recommendations for how to improve your home practice. And you can even do self-retreat from time to time. So on weekends, take your weekends to do an intensive meditation retreat on your own. If you have time off from work, then you can actually self-retreat for a week or even longer, depending on how much time you have. And of course, it's easier in a group, but even by yourself, if you have dedication and persistence, then it can be done, and you can gain much benefit from retreat practice on your own. So these are a few thoughts on retreat practice. So at this time, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. So either from the monastery residents or from the people online. So first off, welcome to all the people joining in. So welcome to Gita, Jayanta, Amaranta, Gina, Mary, Kumu, Patricia, Miguel, Igod, Hasalika, and Suba. So welcome everyone. And Amaranta has a question. She asks, what book do you recommend for a retreat at home? Well, to be honest, I actually don't particularly recommend reading during retreats. In fact, in many, even most meditation retreats, it's encouraged to not read at all. But if you are going to read, I recommend reading the suttas. So nothing else, only the suttas. And if you're not much familiar with the suttas, then a great place to start is the anthology called In the Buddha's Words. So it's a really good selection of short discourses arranged in a thematic order, which is quite well arranged. So that can be a great place to start. But really, any collection of suttas is fine. Just again, if you're going to read something during retreat, the words of the Buddha are just about as good as you can get. Then, but I would say one thing, which is don't think about them too much. Just let it soak into your mind. So don't spend a lot of time like constantly ruminating and thinking about the suttas that you're reading. Just kind of let it soak into your subconscious mind. But try to keep your mind quiet and focused. The suttas have a way of influencing the subconscious if we allow them to. So you don't really necessarily need to intellectually examine them. You can just let the mind steep in them. Next, Kumu asks, do we have to decide on a particular meditation method before before we sit down? Or can we choose depending on the hindrance we feel at that time? Well, ultimately, you want to do whatever gets good results. So it is often recommended to choose a method beforehand and stick to it, because otherwise you might find that you keep shifting from method to method, and then you never really get good concentration on any particular method. So it is usually recommended to choose one method beforehand and focus on that one method for the whole time. On the other hand, if you're getting a very strong hindrance coming up during meditation and the method that you're using is really not working, then sometimes the most appropriate thing to do is to shift to another method that's more directly relevant to the hindrance, especially if the hindrance is repetitive and persistent. Then that's usually a sign you need to do something. And often, if you have a repetitive and persistent hindrance, it's usually related to your dominant defilements. So my dominant defilements are in the aversion category. So when I get persistent ongoing hindrance problems, they're almost always aversion related. And for me, that's an indication that I need to do more metta practice. But it depends upon each person. So each person will have their own dominant hindrances, their own dominant defilements. And that usually gives you a hint as to what meditation practice you need to do more often. But that said, if I'm noticing aversion coming up during a meditation period, I won't necessarily switch to metta at that time, but rather perhaps the next period of meditation, I'll do metta. Even if aversion is coming up during a meditation period, I'll usually stick with the meditation object that I've been using. But I'll remember, okay, I need to do more metta practice as part of my daily routine. Then Scott says, practice becomes difficult when we cease to get our needs met or are in an unsafe environment. Do you have any advice if we can't remove ourselves from the unsafe environment? Yeah, of course, normally the recommendation is to leave. But if that's really not an option, then all you can do is practice equanimity. That's really your only option. Yeah. You need to learn how to be peaceful, calm, and happy, even in the midst of those difficult situations. At some point, we need to learn how to have a peaceful mind, no matter what's happening. And we try to train ourselves in non-reactivity and safe settings, such as a meditation retreat at a monastery. It's just about the safest setting I can imagine for developing a non-reactive mind. But sometimes that's just not an option. Sometimes we're actually in quite dangerous, difficult conditions, and our mind is really not ready for it. But you have no choice. If you get thrown in the water and you're drowning, well, then you better learn how to swim. And yeah, it would have been much better to learn how to swim before you went in the water. But there you are in the water. What are you going to do? You have two options. You learn how to swim or you drown. So it's an uncomfortable choice, but there really is no choice. The only choice is to try to learn how to swim as best you can. So if that's the situation you're in, where you're in an unsafe situation, then yeah, well, you need to learn how to have a peaceful, joyful, non-reactive mind, even though it's very difficult and possibly even dangerous. So I'm assuming here that by unsafe, you actually mean like physically dangerous and not just like grumpy people. If you're just surrounded by grumpy people who say rude things to you, get over it, seriously. Don't make a big deal about it. But if by unsafe environment, you actually mean dangerous, then yeah, I mean, optimally avoid that situation as much as possible. But if you really can't avoid it, then your only option is to practice equanimity. Yeah, and I'm sorry that you're faced with these kinds of challenges. But you can see it as a very powerful learning opportunity. There's something incredibly motivating about danger. So make the most of that motivation. Then Sebastian asks, in meditation, thoughts occur. Is it necessary to be not attached to I and mine, or should I practice non-attachment to anything, including the khandhas? I don't understand the distinction you're trying to make. It's the same. Yeah, I mean, anything that arises, it's just conditions arising and ceasing. It's always not me and not mine. It's always not self. It's always impersonal. And no matter what's arising, we let it go. We let it come and go without reacting to it, without trying to grab onto anything or push anything away. So, so you gave an either/or question, but the answer is both. You do both because they're not separate from each other. It's the same thing. Then Egode says, I have doubt hindrance. And the suttas I heard analysis of qualities should help. Bhante, how would you recommend to practice this? Stop thinking. That's actually the best way. Mindfulness of the body. So doubt is the product of runaway thinking. So practice mindfulness of the body. Mantra meditation can also be really helpful. It doesn't need to be a complicated mantra. It doesn't need to be in Sanskrit or Pali or anything, but just choosing a simple word or a simple phrase and repeating it over and over again, focusing your mind on it. That can help to cut through the skeptical thinking. Yeah, ultimately, if you practice samadhi, then the doubts will start to evaporate. So outside of retreat time, reading through the suttas helps tremendously. For many people, not everyone, but for many people, reading the suttas cover to cover can be a very potent way of overcoming doubt and skepticism. During the context of retreat or during meditation practice, then the important thing is to stop thinking. So practice mindfulness of the body, use a mantra repetition if you need to. No, but just really try to stop the skeptical thoughts. They're not useful at all. Or bring up wholesome thoughts, such as thoughts of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, or thoughts of your own goodness. That also can be very effective. Also reminding yourself of the benefits you've got from Dhamma practice. Any happiness or peace or stability of mind, any progress you've had from your meditation or through practicing morality or generosity, like any benefit you've had from following the Dhamma, remind yourself of the benefits you've had from Dhamma practice. And that helps to build up your faith, which is a direct opposite to doubt. And AS says, it's easy to just want to let it go, but this letting go is a process, yes? Yeah, of course it's a process. Because we have very strong habits of reacting to things, of holding on to things, of rejecting things. So we need to counter those habits. And it takes time. It takes time to change our habits. So it's kind of like when your muscles are very tense and you're slowly relaxing and releasing your muscles. It's not an instantaneous process. It's like a slow softening and releasing and relaxing. So it's the same with holding on. So we're holding on very tightly to our thoughts and opinions and beliefs and preferences and experiences. So we're slowly letting go. Slowly releasing our grip, letting phenomena flow through the mind without sticking. But it takes time. It doesn't happen instantaneously. So that's the last of the questions from online. Any questions from the residents? No? Good. Okay, so, there's one more question from online. Alex says, could you describe a major challenge or a major breakthrough you have experienced during retreat practice? Yes. The first time I was actually I think it was the second time I did a 3-month retreat. And the monk who was leading the retreat encouraged us to sit for 4 hours straight without moving. And he said it was optional. We didn't have to do it, but he was going to do it every day. And we were invited to join him if we wanted to. And of course, when he said this, I was like, this is crazy. He can't possibly mean this. But every day he would sit down at 1:30 and he would get up at 5:30. And I was like, oh, apparently he wasn't kidding. He actually really did mean it. So yeah, after 3 days or so, I decided to start. So I sat down at 1:30 and it was miserable. It was awful. It was painful for about 2 hours. And then at some point it dawned on me, this pain is something I'm doing to myself. It's not the body, it's the mind. This pain is something I'm doing with my mind, and I can stop doing it. And in that moment, I stopped, and all the pain went away. And in its place was an incredible joy and the realization that I could sit still for as long as I wanted. That was remarkable. I've never seen pain during meditation in the same way. So that experience completely changed my relationship with pain. So it's not easy, that kind of practice. It's not easy. But it's something I recommend that everyone do at least once. You will go through incredible pain and agony and suffering. But if you stick with it, you can come to a point where you realize what pain really is. And you'll realize that pain is entirely self-inflicted through our own mind. And we can stop it at any time. After that, it becomes much easier to deal with any kind of body challenges. And there's another question from online. So M says, metaphysical questions terrorize me. For example, why the world is at all, and what was before the Big Bang? Why is the world? There must have been a beginning. What did the Buddha advise? The Buddha advised, don't think about it. That was what the Buddha advised. I'm not kidding. He actually said, don't think about these things. He said it's a complete waste of time to ask yourself these sorts of questions. You will never get an answer. And in the progress, you will just make yourself really uncomfortable and waste a lot of time. So just don't think about it. It doesn't do you any good. Instead, think about the Four Noble Truths. If you want to think about something, then examine what is my dukkha? What am I doing that's creating my dukkha? How can I stop creating my dukkha? These are things that are worth asking yourself. But things like, when did the universe begin? Why does the world exist? It's just a waste of time. It's not going to make you happy. It's not going to do you any good at all. In fact, it's just going to make your suffering worse. It's not going to help. So the Buddha's advice is don't think about it. So that's the end of the questions from online. So I think we can go ahead and end the evening at this time. So we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.